Welcome to Speak English with me.
Improve your vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation with our engaging lessons.
Have you ever sat in front of someone asking simple questions and suddenly your English disappears? You know where you're going and why, but when the officer asks, "Why do you want to visit?" your mind goes blank.
That feeling is much more common than people realize. You can practice the same answer 20 times at home, but an interview feels different because there's pressure. You're thinking about your documents and your future while trying to choose the right English words.
Before we get into the questions, if you enjoy learning English through natural conversations like this, make sure you subscribe to Speak English with me. We create these episodes to help you feel more comfortable when you actually need to speak English in real situations.
And don't just listen today. Practice with us. When we give you a question, take a moment, answer it out loud, and then listen to our example. Even if your answer isn't perfect, that practice is one of the best ways to become more confident.
I like that approach because memorizing a perfect paragraph can actually make things harder. If the officer changes the question slightly, you may suddenly think, that isn't the sentence I practiced. A better goal is to understand the question and explain your real situation naturally.
And remember this, your English does not need to sound complicated. You need a direct answer, a useful detail, and a calm voice.
So let's imagine the interview has just started. The officer asks our first question, "Why do you want to travel to this country?"
A weak answer would be, I want to go because it is a nice country. It's understandable, but it does not tell the officer much.
You could make it more specific. "I'm planning to visit Canada for 2 weeks because I've always been interested in its natural scenery, and I'd like to explore Toronto and the surrounding area."
That answer gives a reason, a time period, and a general plan. The phrase, I'm planning to visit, is also useful when talking about future plans.
Question 2. What is the purpose of your trip? It sounds similar, but the officer may simply want to know whether you are traveling for tourism, business, study, visiting family, or another reason.
If the answer is tourism, you could say, the main purpose of my trip is tourism. I'd like to visit a few cities, experience the local culture, and spend some time sightseeing.
Notice that you're not giving a huge speech. You are giving the main answer and then 2 useful details. That's a good pattern for many interview questions.
And here's something important for English learners. Do not rush because you think silence is dangerous. A short pause can help you organize your thoughts. Speaking too quickly can make you sound nervous even when your English is good.
Question 3. How long are you planning to stay?
This one should usually have a direct answer. I'm planning to stay for about 14 days. I'll arrive on the 5th of September and return home on the 19th.
If you know the dates, giving them makes the answer more concrete, but you do not need to explain your entire schedule unless the officer asks.
Question 4. Where will you be staying during your visit?
You could say, "I'll be staying at a hotel in central London. I've already made a reservation for the first 10 nights. If you're staying with someone, say that clearly. "I'll be staying with my cousin in Manchester."
Then question 5. Who are you traveling with?
A simple answer works well. "I'm traveling alone," or "I'm traveling with my wife and our 2 children." If you're traveling with friends, you can say, "I'm traveling with 2 friends from work."
See how none of these answers require fancy English? The real challenge is staying calm enough to use the English you already know.
Confidence does not mean speaking quickly or using difficult vocabulary. Sometimes, confidence sounds like a calm, simple sentence followed by one useful detail.
Once you understand that, the interview becomes less frightening. You're not performing a speech, you're simply explaining your plans to another person.
And when you think about it that way, your English has a much better chance of coming out naturally.
And that's the mindset we want to carry into the rest of the interview. Clear answers, honest details, and enough confidence to let your real English come through.
One thing that can make an answer much stronger is having a clear picture of what you're actually going to do once you arrive. When an officer asks about your plans, they're giving you an opportunity to explain your trip in a way that feels personal and realistic.
Yes, and I think this is where people sometimes make the conversation harder than it needs to be. They hear a question about their travel plans and suddenly start trying to remember every street, restaurant, museum, and train station they wrote down months ago.
I can imagine someone thinking, I have to mention everything.
Exactly, and then the answer becomes so long that the main point disappears. You can have a detailed itinerary without reciting the whole thing during an interview. The important thing is that you understand your own plans and can describe them naturally.
So let's move to question 6. What places do you plan to visit?
A natural answer could be, I'm planning to spend most of my time in Paris, but I'd also like to take a short trip to Lyon because I've heard a lot about its food and history.
I like that because there's a reason behind the second destination. It doesn't sound like someone simply memorized a list of cities.
Right, and if the officer asks, why Lyon, you already have something to talk about. You might say, I'm interested in French food and I've read that Lyon has a strong culinary tradition. I thought it would be a good opportunity to experience something outside Paris.
That is a good example of handling a follow-up question. You don't need to panic when the officer asks something you didn't prepare word for word. Just connect your answer to something you already know about your trip.
And that brings us to question 7. Have you traveled abroad before?
This one is interesting because some people think having a long travel history automatically makes their answer better.
It can be useful information, but don't try to make yourself sound more experienced than you are. If you've never traveled abroad, you can simply say, no, this would be my first international trip. I've wanted to travel for several years, and I finally have the opportunity to do it.
That's a strong answer because it doesn't sound embarrassed.
Exactly. Not having international travel experience is not something you need to apologize for. You're just explaining your situation.
And if someone has traveled before?
They could say, yes, I visited Turkey, Malaysia, and the United Arab Emirates over the past few years, mostly for holidays. Then, if the officer asks about one of those trips, they can explain it.
Question 8. Why did you choose this country?
This is where a personal reason can make your answer much more interesting. Instead of saying, because it is famous, you could say, I chose Italy because I've been interested in its history since I was a student, and I'd really like to see some of the places I've only read about.
That sounds much more human.
Yes, think about the difference. One answer gives a general fact, the other tells the officer something about you.
And if your reason is connected to family, education, business, or a particular event, you can explain that too. The key is to stay truthful and keep the explanation connected to the actual purpose of your trip.
Question 9. What do you know about the place you are visiting?
This question can make people nervous because it sounds like a test.
But it doesn't necessarily mean you need to become a travel expert overnight. If you're visiting Rome, for example, you might say, I know Rome is famous for its historical sites, including the Colosseum and the Roman Forum. I'm particularly interested in seeing those places because I enjoy learning about ancient history.
So a little knowledge plus a personal connection can make the answer much more natural.
Yes, and it also gives you vocabulary you can reuse. I'm particularly interested in. That's a useful phrase when you want to explain one specific part of your trip.
Then we have question 10. What are you planning to do during your stay?
You could answer, I'd like to spend my mornings exploring the main attractions, try some local food, and leave a few afternoons free so I can walk around different neighborhoods without following a strict schedule.
I like that last part because real trips aren't always perfectly organized.
They shouldn't be. You can have a plan without pretending that every hour of your holiday has already been decided.
And that may be one of the biggest lessons here. When you're answering an interview question, don't try to sound impressive. Try to sound clear, prepared, and comfortable with your own plans.
Yes, because when you understand your trip well, you have more freedom to speak naturally. You can answer the question, respond to a follow-up, and explain your reasons without feeling like one unexpected sentence has destroyed your preparation.
There is another area where an interview can suddenly feel more serious. Questions about your job, your money, and the life you have at home. These questions can feel personal, so I think it helps to remember that you don't need to become nervous just because the subject is changed.
I agree. Sometimes people hear a question about their salary and immediately think, what if my answer isn't good enough? But the best approach is to explain your situation calmly and clearly. You are not trying to impress the officer, you are explaining your circumstances.
So question 11 is, who is paying for your trip?
If you are paying yourself, you could say, I'm covering all of my travel expenses myself. I've been saving for this trip for the past year, and I've already planned my accommodation and transportation costs.
And if another person is helping?
Then say that directly. For example, my older brother is helping me with some of the expenses, while I'll cover my daily spending and transportation.
That sounds much better than giving a vague answer like, my family will pay.
Yes, because the second answer leaves the listener wondering who is actually responsible for the costs. A little detail can make your answer much easier to understand.
Question 12. What do you do for a living?
This is one where I would encourage learners to prepare a clear description of their job. Instead of simply saying, I work in a company, you could say, I work as an accountant for a manufacturing company. I've been working there for almost 4 years, and I'm responsible for managing financial records and preparing monthly reports.
That is a longer answer, but it doesn't feel like too much because every sentence adds something useful.
Right, and this is a good place to use the phrase, I've been working as, because it naturally connects your current job with your experience.
Question 13. How long have you been working there?
You could say, I've been with the company for nearly 5 years. I started as a junior assistant, and I was promoted to my current position 2 years ago.
I like the small story in that answer. It shows progression without the person trying to sell themselves.
And it gives the officer something concrete. If you have been working somewhere for several years, you can explain that simply.
Now, question 14. Do you have family in your home country?
This is where people sometimes become uncomfortable because they think there is a perfect answer.
But there isn't one.
There really isn't. You should describe your actual situation. For example, yes, my parents and younger sister live in my hometown. I also have a wife and children here, so I'll be returning to my family after my trip.
That last detail naturally connects to the next question. Why will you return to your home country?
And I think this can be one of the most important questions to answer without sounding defensive.
What would you say?
I might say, I have a permanent job here, my family lives here, and I have responsibilities that I need to return to after my holiday. My trip is temporary, and I'm planning to come back as scheduled.
That sounds confident because you're explaining your situation rather than trying to convince the officer with emotional language.
Yes, you don't need to say, please believe me, I promise I will return. That can sound anxious. Give the facts and let them speak for themselves.
There's also a useful language lesson here. When talking about your responsibilities, phrases like, I'm responsible for, I have commitments here, and I'm expected to return to work can help you explain your situation naturally.
And if you need a second to think, take it. Imagine you've just been asked a difficult question and your first thought is, oh no, what should I say? You don't have to answer at lightning speed. A short pause followed by a clear sentence is much better than rushing into a confusing explanation.
So these questions may sound serious, but the basic skill is still the same. Understand what is being asked, give the relevant information, and stop when you've answered the question.
Yes, and once you stop trying to sound perfect, you can focus on something much more useful, sounding like yourself, speaking with control, and showing that you understand your own situation.
Some questions are difficult because they ask about situations that you may not have expected to discuss. You might feel comfortable talking about your holiday, and then suddenly the officer asks something that makes you stop and think.
Yes, and that moment can change your whole body language. You start wondering whether there's a hidden meaning behind the question. But sometimes a difficult question is simply a difficult question. The best thing you can do is stay calm and answer what was actually asked.
Question 16 is, why should we approve your visa?
That's a question that can make people freeze. It sounds almost like you're being asked to defend yourself.
So how would you answer?
I'd keep it simple. I believe I've provided the required information, and my travel plans are clear. I'm planning a temporary visit, and I have my work and family commitments at home.
I like that because you're not saying you must approve my visa.
Right. You are explaining your circumstances, and there's an important phrase there. I believe I've provided the required information. It sounds calm and professional.
Question 17 is, what will you do if your visa application is refused?
That's uncomfortable.
Wait, really?
Yes, if you've spent months preparing for a trip, hearing the word refused can immediately make you nervous.
So what would you say?
I'd respect the decision and review my situation before deciding what to do next. You don't need to sound angry or disappointed, even if you would naturally feel disappointed.
That's a good point. Your emotions may be strong, but your answer can still remain controlled.
Question 18. Do you have friends or relatives in this country?
This is another question where honesty matters. If you have relatives there, say so.
You could say, yes, my aunt lives in New York, but I'm traveling mainly for tourism and I'll be staying at a hotel. If you don't have anyone there, simply say, no, I don't have any relatives or close friends there.
And don't turn a simple answer into a complicated story unless the officer asks for more information.
Exactly. Question 19. Have you ever been refused a visa?
Another question that can make someone's heart beat a little bit faster.
Definitely. But if the answer is yes, hiding it or trying to change the story can create a much bigger problem. A clear answer might be, yes, I was refused a visa 2 years ago. Since then, my circumstances have changed, and I'm applying again with updated information.
That's powerful because it acknowledges the past without becoming defensive.
Yes, you can explain what happened if you're asked, but don't start giving 10 minutes of background information before anyone asks for it.
And now question 20. Why are you traveling now?
I'd connect the timing to a real reason. I'm traveling now because I've recently been able to take time off work and I've been planning this holiday for several months.
That sounds natural because it explains both the timing and the reason.
And notice something else. None of these answers require you to sound like a lawyer or a politician. You're simply explaining your circumstances in organized English.
That's probably the biggest lesson from these difficult questions. When you feel pressure, don't try to make your English more complicated. Slow down, listen carefully, and give the information you actually know.
Yes, and if you don't understand the question, there's nothing wrong with saying, could you please repeat the question? Asking for clarification is much better than answering a completely different question because you were too nervous to ask.
I think that's something many learners need to hear. You don't have to pretend you understood everything.
You just need enough confidence to communicate clearly, even when the situation feels uncomfortable.
And now we come to the final 5 questions. And I think these are interesting because they give you a chance to finish the interview by showing that you have thought about what happens after your trip.
Yes, and sometimes people focus so much on getting the visa that they forget to think about their life after the visit. So question 21 is, what are your plans after you return?
A natural answer could be, I'll return to work the following week. I've already arranged my schedule with my manager, so I'll go back to my normal responsibilities.
Good. It connects the trip to something real in your life. Question 22 is, what will you do when you come back home?
You might say, I'll return to my job and continue working on a project that I'm currently involved in. I'm also planning to spend some time with my family because I'll have been away for several weeks.
Question 23 is probably one that makes people nervous. Why should we believe that you will return?
I wouldn't try to give an emotional speech here.
Me neither. I'd say, I have my employment, family responsibilities, and long-term plans in my home country. My visit is temporary, and I intend to return after my planned stay.
Clear, calm, and supported by real circumstances.
Then question 24, is there anything else you would like to tell us?
That's a great opportunity, but it doesn't mean you have to suddenly invent something.
Exactly. If you've already answered everything, you can simply say, no, I believe I've provided all the information you need. Thank you for your time.
And finally, question 25, do you have any questions for me?
If you genuinely have a question, ask it politely. If you don't, you can say, no thank you, I think everything is clear.
Let's do a quick practice interview. I'll be the officer. Ready?
Ready.
What is the purpose of your trip?
I'm traveling for tourism. I'm planning to spend 10 days visiting several historical sites and experiencing the local culture.
Who is paying for the trip?
I'm paying for the trip myself. I've saved for it over the past year and have already planned my main expenses.
What do you do for a living?
I work as a marketing coordinator for a software company, and I've been with the company for almost 3 years.
Why will you return home?
I have a permanent position at my company. My family lives there, and I have responsibilities that require me to return after my holiday.
That sounded natural.
And that is the goal. Don't memorize every answer like you're preparing for a school performance. Understand your own story, know your plans, and practice explaining them in different ways.
Let's finish with a quick word tour. Purpose means the main reason you are doing something. Accommodation means the place where you will stay. Commitments are responsibilities or promises that you need to keep. And refused means that something was officially not accepted.
And remember the most important lesson from this whole conversation. Clear English is not about using the biggest words. It's about understanding the question, answering honestly, giving useful details, and staying calm enough to let your real English come through.
If you can do that, you don't need a perfect speech. You just need to have a clear conversation.
And sometimes that simple change in mindset can make you feel much more confident when the interview finally begins.